War. War never changes. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth. Spain built an empire from its lust for gold and territory. Hitler shaped a battered Germany into an economic superpower. But war never changes.
Fallout is a 1997 video game developed and published by Interplay Productions. Often listed among the greatest video games of all time, Fallout has been credited for renewing interest in the role-playing video game genre. It is the first game in the Fallout series. The plot of the game is centered around the Vault Dweller, who inhabits an underground nuclear shelter in a post-apocalyptic world, decades after a nuclear war between the United States and China. The player must scour the surrounding wasteland for a computer chip that can fix the Vault's failed water supply system. Development on Fallout began in early 1994. Initially, Interplay gave the game little attention, and for the first 6 months, Tim Cain was the sole developer. Cain eventually enlisted the aid of Interplay employees during their spare time. The development team was led by Cain, designer Christopher Taylor, and art director Leonard Boyarsky. By 1996, the development team had expanded to 30. One of the development team described working under Interplay as barely controlled chaos. The initial title for the game, Vault 13, a GURPS post-nuclear role-playing game, was eventually abandoned. Armageddon was considered as an alternative, but was already in use for another Interplay project which was later cancelled. Interplay's president Brian Fargo suggested the title Fallout. Interplay intended to use "I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire" by the Ink Spots as the theme song, but was hindered by a copyright problem, so used another Ink Spot song, Maybe. The development was finished October 1997, after 3.5 years and a total cost of around $3 million.
Our robots were primarily inspired by things like Forbidden Planet. We mentioned that movie before. Its robot, Robbie, which was used in a ton of other movies as well, was a touchstone for a lot of our robot designs. I remember specifically telling our designers that anything new, like a Terminator or RoboCop style design, would be denied, would be rejected. We still had someone who tried to do that. It got rejected. I guess now, though, with synths, I guess any kind of Android is now fair game for Fallout.
Fallout started as a game engine that Cain was developing during his spare time, based on the tabletop role-playing game, Generic Universal Role-Playing System or GURPS. It entered more coordinated development after Cain convinced Fargo of its potential, and Interplay announced it had acquired the GURPS license in 1994. The first Fallout prototype was finished that year. The team considered making the game first-person and 3D, but discarded the idea because the game would not have had the desired amount of detail. They instead went for an isometric perspective. Designed to be open-world and non-linear, Fallout was balanced so that, even though side quests are optional, characters who do not improve their skills and experience through them would be too ill-equipped to complete the game. The decision was made to add the 150-day time limit to keep the player focused on the main quests. The game was nearly cancelled in late 1994 after Interplay acquired the licenses to the Dungeons & Dragons franchises Forgotten Realms and Planescape, but Cain convinced Interplay to let him finish. After the success of the role-playing video game Diablo, Cain resisted pressure to convert Fallout into a real-time multiplayer game. In March 1997, Interplay dropped the license for GURPS due to creative differences with GURPS's creator Steve Jackson. According to Interplay, Jackson objected to the amount of violence and gore. Interplay was forced to change the GURPS system to the internally developed special system. Taylor and Cain were each given a week to design and code it.
We made Fallout with the Sprite engine. GURPS was put into Fallout as modules. So in the middle of the combat system, it would say, this guy attacked this guy. What's his chance to hit? And it would say, well, how far away are they? What item are they using? What are their skills, attributes, whatever. But that was all tucked away in library calls. So when the call came to like, hey, we may be replacing GURPS, how long would it take to do this? I met with Chris, And Chris Taylor said, I have a really cool system I want to talk to you about. Give me 2 days. So I spent those 2 days looking at the code and how everything was isolated into the libraries. And I assisted that a little. I found a few things that weren't quite so isolated, and I tried to clean those up. I got most of them. I probably didn't get all of them. Then a couple days later, Chris came to my office, and he presented his system. And I remember it was attributes, traits, and skills. The attributes were strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, and agility. It was everything but luck. It was specia. The traits were a combination of advantages and disadvantages, and that solved a problem we were currently having where when you GM'd a GURPS campaign, you would often tell players they weren't allowed to take certain disadvantages together. Like if you were already blind, you couldn't take color blindness. In our Fallout version, we had to mark them as mutually exclusive. Sometimes if you had these two, then you couldn't take this one. What we ended up doing was just, Chris's idea of putting advantages and disadvantages together in a trait got rid of any need for that. You just took no trait or one trait or two traits and you were done. And the skills were a really good selection of skills that we could easily just redirect the calls from going to GURPS modules to going into this new game system skill module. My suggestion at the time, though, is I said I really, really want luck because I'd had some really good experiences with luck, especially in GURPS Supers, with buying ridiculous luck and phenomenal luck. And so we put that in. We did two things. We sent it up the chain and we presented it to the team. I don't know if we got any feedback from anyone but Brian Fargo, but his suggestion, and all he said was, when you go up a level in this new system, I don't think it's enough just to buy skills. I want to be able to buy something else. And Chris went, what if we put back in sort of advantages? They weren't quite the same. But because there are no disadvantages, there was nothing we had to worry about balancing there. And also we're restricting it to you buy it every third level. Chris made a bunch of perk trees that were really good. Brian loved it. When we presented the system to the team, they really liked it. They thought it solved some other problems we were having that I won't get into here, but some things we weren't sure how to solve that were coming up in testing. However, after the meeting, one of the team members, Jason Swin, came up to me and he goes, Tim, you presented it and you called it A-slips, the first letter of all the attributes. I was looking at that and I think you could rearrange them into a better word, special. And I was like, oh, Jason, I don't know, special has some negative connotations. Let me think about it. I don't have to tell you. By the next day, I was like, okay, A-slips is out, special's in. And the rest is history.
Fantasy and time-traveling themes were considered before the development team decided on a post-apocalyptic setting. Taylor outlined the design goals in a vision statement, which Cain called an inspiration for the development team, and a major reason why the game came together at all. Fallout was a spiritual successor to Interplay's role-playing video game Wasteland, released in 1988. Almost everyone who worked on Fallout had played it. The team was unable to make Fallout a direct sequel to Wasteland because Electronic Arts refused to license it. The team drew inspiration for Fallout's retro-futuristic art style from 1950s literature and media related to the Atomic Age. Examples included the films Forbidden Planet, A Boy and His Dog, and Mad Max. Influence was also drawn from the optimistic Cold War posters, which Boyarsky reportedly loved. The vaults were influenced by the underground base in A Boy and His Dog. Cain said that the team all loved XCOM, and that Fallout featured combat similar to XCOM's prior to the GURPS license. Cain admired Star Control too, and said it influenced Fallout's open-ended design.
A Boy and His Dog, a film that has become a cult legend.
Right now I'm hungry and I want to get laid.
That's what you always say.
You go find a chick and I'll hustle us up some food.
I can't do good work when I'm hungry.
You ain't pulling that crap on me again. And you can shove that part about how you lost the ability to hunt for food when you learned how to talk.
No food, no females. After World War IV, your dog will tell you what to do.
The sprites in Fallout were highly detailed and required a significant amount of memory on contemporary computers. 21 NPCs were voiced by various actors, with Ron Perlman voicing the narrator. Some characters feature 3D models during conversation called talking heads. Each took 8 weeks to create, with voice recording taking a few months. The talking heads began as sculpted heads of clay, which the team studied to determine which parts should be animated. The heads were digitized using a Faro space arm and Vertisketch, with Lightwave 3D used for geometric corrections and the texture maps created in Adobe Photoshop. Much of the spoken dialogue was written by designer Marco Green, whose method of writing Taylor considered efficient and impressive. The companions, conceived late in development, were not easy to implement. As a result, they were riddled with glitches, including a tendency to shoot the Vault Dweller when they are obscuring an enemy. Cain wrote the prologue, which included the series' catchphrase, "War never changes." Vault Boy and his cheerful nature parodied how 1950s media downplayed the perils of nuclear war.
For advertisements, I know our artists looked at Cold War era posters, and they also looked at comic books, especially the front covers, for just how people posed and how monsters were coming at them vaguely in the background. Our weapons and armor were modeled after a lot of real-world guns, but that was for the regular guns. For the lasers and plasma weapons, we looked at everything from old Flash Gordon movies and serials to things like Blade Runner. And I think you can, if you look at the images, especially the inventory images, you can see that influence. For power armor, what had happened, we needed a high-end armor, and Leonard had made one, but as he talked about in one of the chats, later on when he needed something that was more detailed to show in cinematics, that's when he made the power armor that's on the cover and in the cinematics and subsequently in the game. I know parts of it came from City of Lost Children, the helmet eyepiece. You can see that in the movie City of Lost Children in one of the characters. The tubing and vents were inspired by movies like that. The whole look of tech in City of Lost Children was very inspirational to a lot of our artists. And so our computers and some other gear, I think, also were influenced by that movie.
The development team conceived of a faction of mutants who grew their ranks by dipping people into virus vats. During the discussion, someone wondered what would happen if more than one person was dropped into the vat. The team conceptualized the leader of the faction as a synthesis of a man, a woman, and a computer terminal mutated together. The quests in Fallout were given moral ambiguity, with no clear right or wrong solutions. This was done so the player could take whatever choice suited them best. Assistant designer Scott Benny described the backstory of the Master, who views himself as a well-intentioned hero, as an example of their intention of hitting the player with an emotional sledgehammer as often as possible with their story design. Fallout was released on October 10th, 1997, in North America for MS-DOS and Windows. Fallout was initially not released in Europe due to the player's ability to kill children in-game. Version 1.2 removed the children from Fallout, and it was later released in Europe. Fallout received critical acclaim, with critics considering it one of the best role-playing video games at the time. PC Powerplay predicted that Fallout would revive the genre, and thought that both casual gamers and fans of role-playing would enjoy the game. The Electric Playground said that they can't think of another game that comes even close to Fallout's excellent character generation and skill system, great story, and classy delivery. Fallout was commercially successful, although it was not as popular as other role-playing video games such as Baldur's Gate and Diablo. It did not meet sales expectations, but developed a fan following, selling enough copies for a sequel to be produced. Fallout has been credited as one of several innovative role-playing games that revived the genre's popularity. Rowan Kaiser, writing for Engadget, called Fallout the first modern role-playing game. Fallout also stood out for its focus on the player character, how their choices impacted the game world, and the open world gameplay. Fallout was followed by a series of sequels and spin-offs, often different in genre and ambience from the original game. Cain did not work on any sequels and spin-offs beyond brainstorming for Fallout 2, and left Interplay during its development. Interplay owned the Fallout rights until 2007, when they were purchased by Bethesda. Bethesda would go on to create a series of perfectly balanced Fallout games.
What, dude? What? Oh, there they are.
Oh!
Hey!
Jonathan, no, Mr. Howard!
Good catch, buddy.